Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining Professionals on the Grind, where we share our honest self-talk career advice with driven individuals. And today we have today we have the pleasure of speaking to Veronica Flores. Let's start off with you telling us where you're from and what your current position is.
Sure. Well, great to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Um, I am originally from Chile, and I'm a political refugee, actually, that came in 1974. And so currently, I'm the CEO of Rising Communities, formerly known as Community Health Councils.
Thank you so much. I'd like to start off with a few background questions to help us paint
Mhm.
your journey. So, could you tell us about how you were raised and share a little bit of upbringing from your from your journey, right? So, you came from Chile when you first came to the U.S. Did your parents say, "Hey, go to school"? Did you work? Could you share that?
Sure. It's a hard question, I think, because in retrospect, everything makes sense. But at the time, there was a constant uh, perception that we would be able to go back. Um, and so for a long time, it was putting on hold a lot of what we were all going to do. And then once we realized that the political environment was not going to change and we were not allowed to go back to the country anymore, we had to settle here and really think about that. And so my parents always encouraged us to go to college. So that was something that uh, we all did in my generation. Um, and but at the beginning it was hard, really thinking about, I don't have a plan B, or I didn't
Yeah.
have a plan B, so it was putting myself to college, really thinking about taking care of my family, taking care of myself. And so I first worked, and really, I've had four different careers in my lifetime. So my first career was as certified financial planner. So I worked as a broker and did investments. And so that allowed me the time to go back to school,
Right.
and really, so I was always working and going to school. It was just part of the process.
Right.
And everybody else that I knew was doing the same thing.
Of course. And to sort of touch back on your parents, did they stress the importance of a career that was going to make money, or was it simply important to them that you received an education? Because I think oftentimes our parents are like, we need to make money. What did we come to this
Yeah.
country for? What was
Yes.
their push for you?
Both.
Okay.
But you're absolutely right. And I think a lot of it for me, and also, as a Latina,
Right.
unless this next generation really changes, it's very much centered around the men and what
Right.
the men need to do, and so the sons are encouraged to do all kinds of stuff. Whereas, and so it was a little bit different in for me, in that my father really encouraged me. And so we had a lot in common. He encouraged me to go to college, he encouraged me to do more, where my mother just wanted me to get married.
Oh, wow.
And my mom wanted me to get married, and because she was always telling me how worried she was about someone taking care of me. And I think
Very
that's a
old
huge
school.
piece. Oh, very old school.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a huge piece because I'm a feminist.
Right.
And I've been a feminist since I've been an activist since I was 14 years old. So
That's
the
amazing.
clash of many young people, even today, right, is we perceive, or young people perceive, and the way I perceived is that I wanted to take care of myself.
Of
I
course.
wanted to sort of build a career for myself about what I wanted to do. And the bridging. And I think the other part we have to think about is not only where our parents are pushing us,
Right.
but where is this country pushing us?
Of course.
Or not, right? And
Where
so we're struggling two, three worlds all the time.
1000%. I think you just touched on something that I personally can connect to because my although my both of my parents pushed education, it was a very sexist and machista household in the house. So they said, go get a career, but you need to wash dishes while your brother gets to just hang out and do nothing.
Yep.
And I found myself fighting within my culture and my personal feminist views of, wanting to not be a stay-at-home wife, wanting to have a career, have my own money.
Yeah.
For you, how was it in your parents telling you to go to college versus helping you? Were they able to find resources, or did they just expect you to figure it out?
They expect me to figure it out.
Okay, which is
Yeah.
very common. Yes.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
so
they
when
expected me to figure it out. And actually, what's really funny is that you know, get an education, get an education, get an
right,
education. But education as sort of the general topic. And then once I went to school, finally found my way into what I really wanted to do,
right,
which is organizational development. I could never explain to my parents what I actually did for a living.
right.
you
You know
know?
what? I completely sympathize because when I told my parents, they were like lawyer or doctor. That was it. That
Exactly.
was the only thing they knew would make money in this country.
That's right.
So even when I decided to start as a business major, I was judged so harshly by my parents. They didn't understand. They later regretted it, like, oh, nobody, because I changed it. I changed my major to poli sci because again, I wanted to be involved in the community. I wanted to run for office one day,
Yeah.
and so forth. And they just didn't equate that to being lucrative or being a career of a
That's
professional
right.
that they deemed correct in their eyes.
Yeah.
So, and again, they weren't helping with FAFSA. They didn't understand how to submit. They just like, here's my tax information. I've never done taxes. How am I supposed to break this information down?
Yeah.
So it's so interesting to know that they want what's best for us, but they don't necessarily know how to help us with that or understand.
Yeah.
And it also goes to like the awareness of education, careers. I think when you first come to this country, at least for my parents, you really don't know the possibilities or the varieties of careers. And as I was mentioning to a few other guests, I had no idea what computer science was or if that was even a major. I wasn't aware because I was a kid in the inner city, right? Versus once
Yeah.
you get to college and you say, oh, I have options. And then you're a junior and you're like, oh, I should have done that instead. Or you join the career world and you're like, oh, that major would have made me a lot more money. But it's okay. So to segue into education, could you speak about what your history was and that choice behind being, an activist? You said you started at 14. Did that really propel you to choose your major and focus that within your education?
Yeah, yeah, it definitely changed my life. Actually, when I first, because I wanted to do international politics.
Yeah,
And so, being a political refugee in this country,
of course.
when I got here, and my father was politically involved. That's how we ended up, in all this
Oh,
mess.
wow.
And so for me, the idea of fighting for what we believe
Yes,
was in my blood, right? It was part of what I grew up seeing my father. My father was very civically engaged. So he encouraged that in us,
I love that.
join this, join that, do this, support your community. You want something done, get involved. Don't ask
Yeah,
anybody, do it. So it was always that very do it yourself kind of push in our
right,
household. And I was very similar to my father. So it was easy for us to align, and for me to follow him. He was my idol. And so when I came to this country, and I had not experienced racism in the way it
yeah.
was. And I'm here, and I think the second week that I arrived, we arrived in Connecticut,
Oh, wow.
and they wanted to beat me up all the time. Like, people want to beat you up?
Yeah.
I was like, what?
Let's go back.
I just got here. And they call me names. So they were, it was just this horrible environment that I just wasn't used to. And I think it happens to all of us, right? We come
Yeah,
from our countries, and we can experience all kinds of discrimination and prejudices. But the overt racism of us not belonging, that was a different experience. You're not from here. Leave. You don't speak English. What's wrong with you? And so that feeling, it wasn't a welcoming feeling. It
right.
wasn't a welcoming space, and we couldn't go back to our own country. So I would have these arguments when somebody would say something to me. I would say, the only reason I'm in this country is because of your country. Because your country invaded my country
Of
and
course.
forced that what happened in 1973. The CIA did it, right? And so it
Of
was
course.
like so I would have these arguments, and finally I decided I need to move this energy because that's part of what happens to many of us. And I think this is
Right.
something important, Diana. And I don't know if it happened to you, but I was one of those people that carried a lot of anger in me.
Yes. Yes.
And
1000%.
that can be so destructive to us,
Yes.
because we turn it and we're so angry about everything. And it wasn't just about me. We look at our community and you see other people experiencing this. And so you just want to fight all the time.
When
And
did
so it
that switch
changed
happen for
me.
you? When did
Pardon?
that when did that decision to like not be angry happen for
Oof.
you? I'll share
That
mine.
didn't change. Oh, I'm telling you right now, that did not change until my late 20s.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. And my activism though
Yeah,
changed. It
of course.
evolved. And so, by the time that, my first part of activism was around immigration.
Yes.
It was around immigration, and I started to work a lot around Central America immigration.
Right.
Even though I'm not Central American, I felt like, we had a special kind of allowance from
Yeah.
Chile. And I would see, my fellow people, feeling this. And so I decided, you know what, this is where I need to be. So that was sort of my first moved into that. Um, but along the way, we ended up in California.
Hmm.
And once I got to California, I think about a year after arriving, I came out of the closet. So I'm a
Really?
lesbian.
How was
And
that with your parents, with your family?
oh, no, no, no. I
Mm,
did not come out to them.
okay.
I came out to my siblings, but not my mom and dad.
Right.
And that's the hard part, because my mom wanted me to get married so badly to a man. And so her
Right.
whole thing is like, you're only going to be cared by a man. You don't even need a career. You just need a man,
Right.
right? And you just need to wear lipstick and you need to paint your nails. That was her
Right.
thing, right? And
Hmm.
so my father on the other end was like, no, you do you. And so, but I still didn't come out to him because I felt like he was going to reject me. The whole
Of
thing
course.
around rejection, it's what holds many of us back.
Of course.
And they were the only family I had. So as immigrants, we get a different experience.
And
We're
I'm not too familiar with Chilean customs, but do they also have a conservative viewpoint within machismo? Were you guys also very, did you grow up Catholic, religious?
not
Uh,
religious,
not
no.
religious. Okay.
Yeah, I
But
mean, we're Catholic. It was part of like you just kind of born and you're
yeah,
Catholic, right?
yeah,
Latinos are. You're born
yes.
and Catholic.
It's cultural at this
It's
point. Yeah.
cultural, yeah. But my father, my mom and dad were never very religious at all. In fact, they believed, they believed in the saints more than anything. So they
Right.
lit candles, and stuff like that in the bathtub. But they never went to church. So at least I didn't have to worry about that piece, which is the added component of many of our people. It's like, it's that extreme religious impact.
I'd like to ask you a question because you're a fellow brown Latina like myself. And
Mhm.
growing up, white Latinos don't really understand, but I would love for you to share that experience. Did you, and being born in Connecticut, even being in California, I didn't think there was racism in California. There is racism and discrimination amongst our people and the people you encounter. So could you share your experience as a brown Latina?
You know, um, in Chile it's very very mixed. But I grew up in Santiago in that area, and so it's a little bit more light skin. And then in my family, we had a mixed family, as many Latinos are.
Right.
So my mom and dad were white skinned. My grandmother had an affair with a
El escándalo.
man. I know, it's like a portal. You can only do that when you get old.
Yeah.
And when my grandmother had the affair, she had my mother. And that man was of indigenous background.
Hmm.
And so out of my five siblings that we are, I am the most brown,
Yeah.
right? And then there's another brother who's a little lighter brown than me, and then everybody else is lighter. And um, it was so mixed. And I just, in Chile, I never felt it. I never had that any experience around any of that. And I think I was fortunate because that's not necessarily the case all the time. I just happened to be fortunate. I never got it. In this country, however, um, I do sense that, you know, what really is unfortunate is that when light skinned Latinos would ask me, so where are you from? And I
Mm,
say, from Chile. Somehow I'm in a different class, in a different category.
mm,
And that I hate,
yeah,
honestly, because it's like, then no longer is my brownness an issue because somehow I'm different,
yeah,
you know. And that's always like, it's been a really odd um aspect of my relationships, and yeah, so I you know, outside of that, and so mostly I think the real impact of racism and discrimination, and you know, I mean, all of it, you know, all the
right,
discrimination pieces are really because as a woman is where I felt a ton of it. Being a
hmm,
woman, particularly a woman who is in charge.
right,
And I've been a CEO now, I've been a CEO before, you know, I've run 3 companies myself, I started 2 companies. Um, and there's always a question about who I am and what I do.
right.
And you know, one of the, if I could just tell you a quick story. I
Yeah,
mean,
of
this
course.
is one of the things that I tell my team, my young, you know, I have a young team, and they're all black and brown, and I tell them all the time, don't put up with shit. Excuse me,
I love it.
because you have to stand for who you are, you know. And so I had someone, a board member, really, say to me, you know, was speaking to me in just this way. And so I said to him, why do you feel like you can talk to me this way? You are my board member, but somehow you feel like you can talk to me this way. Now, I have moved this company from $900,000 to $60 million in 5.5 years. If a white man was in front of you and had done this as a CEO, would you be talking to him like that?
Hmm.
He had to just pull back. And I said, when you're ready to tell me how you really think, we'll have another call. He sent me a text about a day later saying, I am so sorry. You're absolutely right. I would never have spoken to a white man like that.
Right.
But I've never had a man or a white man actually admit to that. And
Wow.
so I think we just have to be present and intentional about honoring who we are.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And I love that story. And I do want to touch base on that in a little closer to the professional aspect of this interview. But
Mhm.
I commend you for that, and I think it's such a strong, powerful message coming from a woman of color, a minority. Just because even for myself, I encountered having to bite my tongue with my first job, first corporate job, and after I quit, at the time I felt like I needed to not say anything. I needed the job. I needed the money. I couldn't speak up for myself. Now I'm in such a different position,
Yeah.
not even just in the position career wise, but mentally. I think again, when you first start your career and you think I'm so green, I have nothing on my resume, how how dare I say something, or like I need this job, I need to pay my bills, like I shouldn't fight against racism or sexism. But that's the wrong mindset to have, and
Yeah.
everyone should report everything at all times, is what I tell people. Glassdoor, Glass Ceiling, that website, I'm like, I wish I would have gone back and written, an essay about that company, because holding people accountable is so necessary. And you start with yourself. You start with one voice, and then you inspire other people to do so too, because you're not the only one getting discriminated or getting
That's right. That is totally
mistreated.
right.
So I do want to revert back a little bit to your education. And I know you mentioned, your father's activism really propelled you to choose your major. So when did you realize, again, you were going to stick to this? It was just no, you started out with poli sci and then you switched over, right, to something else?
No, international finances.
International finances.
Yeah,
Okay.
this was international politics and finance. And uh, then I took a break because I really moved into, I wanted to understand, I love the stock market just because I
Mhm.
wanted to understand it. And I wanted to understand. How are people making money in this country?
Right.
I need
Oh,
to know this, right? And
yes.
so, and I thought, okay, there's so much emphasis on the market, right? And so I didn't understand. It's a constant, and the S&P 500 is doing this and this.
Yeah.
What is that, and how is that impacting our communities, right? And so I went and I studied that, and then I got my certification, and then I began to work in financial planning and
Right.
as a stockbroker.
Now, before we move forward to that, would
Mhm.
you do anything different in college, knowing what you know now and being out in the workforce that would help somebody else that's currently thinking about majoring in the same thing that you are?
Yeah, absolutely. I was also a professor at USC for a bit, and so I would always tell my students, when you graduate from your undergrad, if you're not sure, like some people know, some people just know. They
Yeah.
just like they study, they go to school, they do that, and that's their career path, and they feel happy with it. Some of us don't. Some of us really need to figure it out. Life
Right.
has changed. Life has changed.
Yes.
Opportunities have changed, and so I would always say, take a year
Mm,
to not, when you say a gap year, that gap year isn't to go and sit and watch TV and just kind of hang
right.
for a year, but it's really an opportunity for you to, volunteer. If you don't have to work and you have the support, then take that year and really volunteer, do internships, do as much as you can to really figure out, is this really what I want? Because
Right.
had I taken the time to do that, I would have aligned it with my own passion, with my own sort of uh, political understanding and what I
Right.
needed to fill my soul. And so by the time I was already doing financial planning and investment, and I would have these portfolios and I would have to invest in like oil and all this other stuff that I was fighting for at the same time. So during the
Mm,
weekdays, I'd be selling stocks in oil and all the other
right.
stuff. In the evenings and weekends, I would protest outside of the Shell gas stations, like, don't buy gas.
Well, can you speak on that a little bit, because we're about to jump into your professional setting. I think where a lot of people have conflict, especially in the industries that we're in, which is community outreach, community engagement, is compromising your beliefs for a paycheck, because you still need
Exactly.
to live. How do
Yeah.
you find that balance? How did you find the balance?
It took me a minute. I mean, I think, from that, I actually took a break. Once I decided this is hard, it was breaking me in two. And when we feel like we are breaking in two and you're leaving parts of you in order to perform a job,
Right.
there's something wrong.
Yeah.
Splitting your soul doesn't work. It just makes you become less and less of yourself. And as a young person, that's hard enough as it is.
Right.
So I took a break, and in that break, I went from my regular job that I was doing selling stocks, and I was doing well in my early 20s. I left that and I took a $16,000 a year job, and
Pay cut, a
I could
major
only
pay
do it
cut.
for a year because I was taking
Yeah.
care of myself. Nobody was
Right.
taking care of me. I had my own place, and so I only did it for a year while I could afford it, but that changed my life.
Right.
It was then that I started to work in at the Alcoholism Center for Women, because there was a program there for Black and Latina women around prevention. And so it was really organizing events and bringing them in, talking about safeties, talking about peer support, building networks of women. So I thought, I want to do that.
Right.
And I had no experience, but it paid so little that they gave me the job. And I said, yeah, I can do it, no problem. So that was the turning point into the
Right.
nonprofit sector.
I love that. And I'd love, since we're at the beginning of your career now, right? You took a direction in a field that you had no experience in. And I think today's market, it is so hard to jump sectors with no experience.
Yeah.
Is there anything you can recommend someone that is trying to make that pivot to something else? How would they, uh,
Yeah.
other than a pay cut, right?
Yeah. Other than taking a pay cut. So one of the things that we are really bad at is building our networks.
Mm,
We're really bad at that, you know?
yeah.
And I can't emphasize enough how important building your networks is to your career, because that gives you insights, you know, by you building a network. And I mean, that's when I found my first mentor, who's still my mentor today. She's
I
actually
love
86 years old. And so she was my mentor when I was in my 20s, and Black woman who said, you know, I see it in you, you know, I see the potential, right? Your anger has to be turned into something else, you know? And so, uh, you know, consider this area, you know, look at, they're working around women and HIV at the time, you know, maybe it's something that you might be interested in. So I was able to have a mentor that allowed me to really think differently, right? And so I would say first is really building your network. And what I mean by building your network, it's not just a transactional,
Mm-hmm.
you know, area or a transactional task that
Right.
you have to perform in order to move to the next level. It really has to come from a place of, in my network, it's a two-way street. That's how networks really get built, right? And so, um, you know, let me pick your brain. You know, I think you're amazing. I would find women and on some roster, because we didn't have social media when I first was doing it, on rosters and organizations, and I would say, who do you recommend? I would talk to somebody else. You know, I really would love to meet other people who are doing this. And the next thing you know, you start to meet people, get introduced. And so I began to build my networks, which actually were incredibly helpful for this job that I currently have. From 20 years ago, from 30 years
Wow.
ago, you know, it
Yeah.
was like, so these networks are for lifetime. And
Right.
so you have to nurture them, and you have to think, you know, I'm asking, I also need to give. So
Right.
building your network, I think, is what really made a difference in my life. And secondly, and not by priority, the mentorship part. You know,
Yes.
really finding people who cared about me. You know,
Right.
that's important. I
I
think.
1000% agree with you. I
Mhm.
also have a mentor, Suzanne Rico, who influenced me to create this channel because of the impact that created on my personal and professional career. So I think it's so important for people to try to find one. And I do have a variety of questions for you with this. When you first started out with your mentor, or even in giving advice to someone seeking a mentor,
Mhm.
what is the ask that you're making? How can you speak more on cultivating that relationship? And one thing that I recently learned, because I was a part of this cohort through work and we all were assigned mentors at work, I was the only one that gave direction to the person that I was assigned to. It's like, hey, these are my goals, these are my objectives. Everyone else was like almost not speaking to them, and they didn't know they wanted to advance professionally. I'm like, well, maybe people don't know how to cultivate the
Yeah,
relationship that they need from that mentor. Could you
yeah.
share a little bit about that?
You know, that's a fantastic question, because this is actually just happening right now, and you know, when I take on a mentee, it means that that's the first thing I'm going to ask you.
Yeah.
What are your goals? Like, what do you care about? Who are you? You know, what's your support system? So they can do the same. It's like finding a person that you like. You gotta like your mentor,
Yeah.
right? So finding a person that you know, you hear them talk. I mean, that's really how I found mine, you know.
Right.
And it's just not one. In my lifetime, I had 5 mentors, because there were different areas that I
Yes.
needed. They don't, you know, one person can never fulfill all that you need. And I keep getting, right. I keep getting these people that I pursue now. I had a dinner last night with someone who I, you know, wanted to pick her brain, and I said, let's go to dinner. I want to pick your brain and get to know you. And she was like, oh, okay. So, you know, I'm not asking for a mentor at this point,
Right.
uh, but I'm still in that place. And I think it never ends, that inquisitiveness that
Yeah.
allows you to do your next thing. And so
Right.
it's been about, I would say, if someone is going to find a mentor, going back to your question,
Hmm.
define what you want. And maybe you don't know. Maybe you don't know, right? But at least begin by having the pros and the cons in your life.
Yes.
Like, what are my pros right now? What am I happy about? What do I really want? And then the cons, I don't have a lot of support from my family. I'm living in a house with a whole bunch of people,
Right.
whatever that is. And so that your mentor would have a sense of what is that environment around you, right? That really is, because it's about your environment.
Right.
Everything you are and you do is who you relate to and who you have around you.
1000%. One thing,
There's research on that. There's
no, it
research
is.
that's been going on for years about in the influence of people in your life, your friends.
1000%. Or that old saying, you are who you hang out with, right? If
It's
you're
true.
around driven people, you're going to be more driven within your career. If you're around articulate people, your vocabulary is going to go up, right?
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
one thing I like to tell people, and also for anyone listening, I always like to do a self-assessment within where am I professionally and personally. But if I'm thinking about a professional mentor, I want to know, what am I working on this year? Do I need to work on my presentation skills? Does my writing need to improve? Is there someone that I can emulate that is around me, that just like you mentioned, I kind of like how this person presents themselves? And one thing that I recently spoke to my girlfriend about was, what are your professional principles? You should have this within yourself, because one, you can always refer back to them when you're interviewing, and you make a great little hint at, I'm a great public speaker, or I'm honorable, whatever your principles are. And within that frame of assessment,
Yeah.
that is how you know who you want to ask to guide you to achieve those goals. And how do you assess yourself? Is that something that you are telling mentees? Could you tell us from a mentor perspective
Hmm.
what you tell people to fix, or is there a reoccurring theme what people ask you, like, hey Veronica, like, I need help with this? Could you give us some insight on your mentorship?
Yeah. I have I have a number of mentees right now in different career paths, and um, I think for those that are at the beginning of their career, it's a little bit different,
Yeah.
right? My questions to them are different. And so my questions to people who are beginning their career, or just at the beginning stages of their career, is exactly what we just talked about. But really understanding the next phase of it, which is when you think about the next, I never think about, what do you want to do when you are like 30 or 40? I don't
Right,
know.
right.
I don't know. But knowing where you want to be in the next 2 years gives me a lot of information about a person.
Okay.
And one of the responses I get a lot, when I've talked to when I was teaching, mostly not in the mentees that I have now, but was the question of, what do you care the most? Well, I need to make a lot of money,
Mm.
and I hear that a lot, and so I used to hear that a lot, and so then the question would be, for what? Because that allows me to see, what do you care about?
Right.
Where's your core?
Mm.
you know and that's important to me, because I have to take on my mentee that I feel like their values align with mine,
Of course.
and vice versa. I mean, it's a
Of course.
two-way street again, right? And so by asking just those couple questions, I know where they're going, and so whether it's going to be an alignment or not.
And what about someone at mid-level into their career? What is the first question you ask?
The first question is, what do you need to be successful?
Mm. And what's the
and
second
uh,
for?
and we can
Well,
break it out. We break it out.
right.
But I have people who are in pretty high positions that are a couple of my mentees, and that's my question. Like, what do you need to be successful? I need you to be successful, um, because I'm only mentored to women of color,
Right.
and not for anything, but I
They
I
need it. Yeah.
yeah.
They need help.
So, values, right? Values. And
Of course.
so that's the first thing. I think it's, what do you need? Because I need you to be successful. And
Right.
so, and then clarify. And once the minute you have an open-ended question like that, the answer is going to tell you exactly whether our values align. Again, right? It's just a simple question: will our values align? Because if you tell me that in order to be successful, you need to get rid of some people, do this, and you're very specific about dismantling without knowing the environment in which you're working, it
Hmm.
tells me there's some immaturity. And
Could
so
you,
I need to address that immaturity.
of course, could you share assessing your environment? I think as Latino, and you hit the nail. You're living in a house of, 16 siblings, to exaggerate a little bit with your
Oh
parents.
my
And
goodness.
your parents are strict and they don't understand why you have this stepping stone position and you're not making, the money that you should be making or bringing in. Could you speak on that? Because I think a lot of people, first generation, and maybe even some second, third generation, they're experiencing that right now and they don't know how to remove themselves from that environment because they're scared. You know, could you speak on that?
That's a hard one for me to address, actually, because I think, um, you know, 10 years ago, I would have told you a different answer.
Right.
Because today it's really hard. It's
Hmm.
really hard. And so today, I really don't, honestly, today I think I would say I can give you an answer, but the
Right.
reality of things right now,
Difficult.
the economics of this country, the housing situation, transportation, climate, all of these things are in the forefront right now. And so
Right.
for a young person who's living in a household with a bunch of people and trying to do something, and many of us, right, are still working remotely. I was
Right.
talking to someone, a young person yesterday actually, who said, it's so hard for me because I, my family, Latina, my family doesn't understand that I'm working,
Right.
because we're remote now. After COVID, we stayed remote. And so she said, they don't understand I'm working.
They don't
And I'm
respect your
getting in trouble
boundaries.
because I'm not doing my work, but they step in, and since they see me on the computer, they're like, hey, good. And she says, and I'm trying to work.
Right.
And so it's a really different and hard environment. And so she did the same thing. She moved out, and now it's like, how do you do it? You know?
I'd like to share a little bit because to me, I came from I'm one of six. We're a family of eight, conservative. I didn't have a car. And straight out of college, I was like, how am I going to work? Me, I like to think strategically. So what I did for everyone listening is I looked at the closest businesses and I knew the bus route. I was very familiar with the bus route. So I was like, okay, this bus goes straight to downtown LA and that's how I'm going to get to work. Like I'm going to choose a job that is close to my home that even if I have to wake up 2 hours earlier before, I'm going to do that. So that's exactly what I did for a year. And it was a personal sacrifice I had to make because I had to understand my situation, right? Like
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
parents weren't they wouldn't have been able to buy me a car, and even if they were, at the time I was very prideful and I was like, no, I'll figure it out, I'll buy my own car and I'll suck up the bus route and I'll go to work. And in even having my job, it was, I think I was getting paid 40K a year. It wasn't enough money. Once you get taxed, I had to learn about taxes and all of that, and I was like, oh my goodness, what? I get paid nothing. And at the time, it's like my parents were happy
Mhm.
that I had a job,
Yeah.
and I worked for a local private nonprofit, Los Angeles Economic Development Corporation. They had no idea what that was. They had no understanding of anything that I was trying to do. They just understood that I had a job. And there came a moment into my adulthood where I was still expected to cook for eight people, clean for eight people, and I was like, hold on. There's six of us. There's actually eight of us in the house. Like, and I like to cook when I was younger. So that job just stayed with me even as an adult.
Uh,
And I said, oh my goodness, I think it is time to step away from this. And I'm not going to lie. I moved out and the apartment were crazy then, right? Like it was very pricey, but it was important to me to grow. And what a lot of first generation Latinos don't understand is you are guilted to the end of time, la familia, you stay, how dare you? It
Yes.
was so controversial when I moved
Yes.
out,
Me
Veronica.
too.
My mom didn't come to visit me in my apartment till this year. I've been here for 5 years.
Wow.
It was crazy. Just to give a little bit of insight, right?
Yeah.
And my parents just didn't understand the whole first year. Like no one talked to me. I was alone, and I had three older siblings. They were still living at home, and it was such a shock. But I needed to do it, and it was one of the biggest growing experiences for me, not just personally but professionally. Because now
Mhm.
professionally, oh, I'm not gonna go back. I need to work harder to
Yeah.
keep advancing and to keep making more money and to really make something of myself so that I don't, I guess I'm proving them wrong, right? But I'm also proving myself right.
Yeah.
And as a
Yeah.
Latina, I recommend, if you're in a similar situation, I recommend you move out. I recommend you really find your place, whether that means a roommate or
Yeah.
whatever situation, but growing and assessing your home life. And even if my parents, if it wasn't like a crazy situation for me, you still find a way to make things work professionally, right? Figure out what that means to you and then grow from it, continue growing from it. So it is hard. It is hard. You
It
kind of
is.
have to
It's
think,
incredibly hard. It's incredibly hard. And actually, and it's so funny because I had the same experience.
really? Okay, please tell us your experience because,
When I moved out, I did the same thing because I was like,
yeah,
I can't do this. I was
yeah,
expected to make the beds
right,
and, serve. And then finally I was at their house, my parents' house, and my brothers were there. And I just, go help you. They were having a really interesting political conversation.
right,
I was political at the time. So I'm like, oh, yeah. So I had more information than any of them at the table.
of course.
Right. And I'm having the conversation. My father says, why don't you go help your mom
Mm,
and bring the onces as we have. And I was like, why don't you tell one of the guys to go get it? I'm having a conversation with you guys here. Tell the guys. Oh my God. My
ese
father,
escándalo.
get off the table, go out, get it out. It was a huge thing.
Right.
And after that, I thought,
Done.
I can't do this.
Yeah.
I'm never going to grow as a person. I'm never going to be able to, like you said, it was like be strategic. So I did the same thing, and I found me a roommate,
Hmm.
and then we got an apartment, and it was the same thing. And okay, I got to keep this going because now I got to take care of myself. I got to pay my car. So
Right.
definitely, it's a cycle, but it pushes you.
1000%. And I also want to tell people, if you don't have kids, right, and you're single, or even if you have a partner, that is a time to sacrifice.
Yeah.
I, one, and maybe you can sort of share because we're touching on the beginning of your career, right? 1 year out of my parents' house, and I realized I was penny pinching. I didn't like that. And not only was I penny pinching, I was at a stepping stone position. So I reassessed my life, and out of the miracle of something, or I don't know, the universe, I was like, I'm going to get a weekend job, an admin weekend job, because I was not going to work retail. And I got on Craigslist, I got on Indeed, and the milagro, I found a weekend admin job at a dance studio. I go and interview, and I'm working 7 days a week. And all of my friends, I had a boyfriend at the time, they were like, why are you working so much? And I was like, money. What do you want me to tell you? Like, at this point in life, it is money. Like, I need money. And, I went from 40 to like a 46, 47. It wasn't even life changing, but I just didn't like the feeling of penny pinching. Or, I wanted to just have enough money in my bank account at the time.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? I am going to accelerate my resume because now I'm going to have two admin positions within my job or within my resume. And once I'm ready, I gave myself a year. After a year of grinding out for 365 days a year, essentially, I will then elevate myself to another position that pays more
Yeah.
or the same or more of my two jobs, right? And luckily I was able to do it. But what I'm trying to get at is the sacrifice. You need to be willing to sacrifice at the beginning of your career in order to then just start living more comfortably. Did you ever experience something like that? I think a
Oh
lot of
yeah.
people don't
Oh
talk about
yeah.
the level of sacrifice you have to make.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was plus I was for me, what was important was being involved politically.
Yes.
So actually, there's a documentary now of the work that I was doing in the 80s.
Oh, that's
So
beautiful.
yeah, it's kind of
What's
cool.
the name? What's the name? That way,
Unidad.
anyone.
It's called Unidad. It's playing on PBS. So
Oh,
it's
wonderful.
yeah, it's called Unidad, Gay and Lesbian Latinos Unidos. And so that was a group that was that I was working with, and we launched a whole bunch of stuff, right? And we launched Bienestar, which is one of the largest healthcare systems for Latinos in the country right now, and it's in LA. And that's one of the things we started in those days. So we did a lot of work
Right.
in our community, and we worked with United Farm Workers, and so that was 7 days a week of a lot of that work. It was a
Yeah.
lot of work, and then I have my full time job. So having a roommate was incredibly important, and sometimes friends would just stay with us, and so it was one of those activist homes, where people would just kind of stay and move, and but it was definitely a point where I would say for me, it's about risk.
Mm-hmm.
And you are a risk taker, clearly.
Yeah.
Not everybody is. And so, and it can be a learned way to operate.
Right.
And that's, I think, what I find still today is two things that hold some of the young Latinas that I know. One is around fear of change,
Yes.
right? And taking risk, right? Change and risk are right there together. And so one of the things I always did is when I felt like I know this already, like know what you know what you don't know. Be clear.
Right.
I don't know that, but know what you don't know, but also make sure you know what you know. And
Right.
give yourself that value. And in that moment, when you realize, oh, I got this in the bag. Now you have a choice at that moment, right? Because there's always a path in our career. You can always say, I'm comfortable here.
Right.
I'm just going to stay because I'm comfortable. I'm doing great. I'm doing great in this job. Everybody likes my work. It is in that moment at the top of your game where you say, okay, I need to shift. I need to pivot to something higher.
Right.
And it's hard, right? Because you're leaving back sometimes people that you work with and you like, and a job that you're very comfortable doing.
Yes.
It was in that moment that I would pivot and move on to another job. And a bigger job, a manager job, a supervisor job, a director job, a deputy director job, a CEO job, right? And so it was really taking that challenge of yourself
Of course.
into it. But the other part is this thing of the imposter syndrome, which I don't think that we even have to talk about imposter syndrome because
Yes.
we're not imposters. We are, if you know what you know and you know what you don't know, like I said, then there shouldn't be a reason for us to feel like an imposter. But I always did. Like I would get to the next, because I would take that risk. I'm like you. I would take the risk and I would go to the next thing. And then I would get there and it was new. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh my God, do I belong here? Do I really know what I'm doing?
I know I got this job, but do I
I
really?
know what I'm doing.
Yes. So I actually wanted to ask you because I've seen your resume and you do have a great track record of jumping in a very tasteful manner. What I've heard from a lot of colleagues, friends, is if you don't have the experience, it is so hard to jump to like the next level. Internally, you get halted. If somebody knows you're an admin, they're not really going to give you the coordinator position or, a manager position.
Mhm.
What would your advice be to someone? How would they navigate that? Leave the company or stay within the company and ask people, "Hey, I want to learn this job and I want it." What would
Exactly.
your advice be? Okay.
Exactly. That's exactly right. I mean, you got it all in there, Diana, because that's exactly how you do it, and that's how I did it. It was that curiosity. Again, live in curiosity. It is the best experience you could possibly have, to constantly be wondering. The wondrous part doesn't go away as you get older. It just,
Right.
and so being curious about that in your career is to say, what do you want to learn? Right. And so when I was doing, for example, I took on one position where I really wanted to learn how to write grants, because I knew that people who were writing grants were like highly sought out, good grant writers. It was a great skill. So
Yeah.
learning how to write well. So I knew I had to have the basics, right? And so I became a very good writer because I needed to have the basics. I would say to everyone who's out there, be a good writer. If you don't feel comfortable, take a class. There's lots of stuff now online for free that you don't even have
Right.
to leave your house. But be a strong writer. That's one of the big pitfalls. I can't hire people who don't know how to write.
Mm,
When I was teaching at USC, I have to
right.
tell you, it was really disappointing. I had to go to the administration, the very first class I had, and I was just like, I was teaching grant writing. The first class was grant writing. And half of the class could not write. This is USC students who are
Yeah.
paying a ton of money to be there. So I went to the administration. I said, listen, I'm going to have to change the curriculum because otherwise I'm going to have to fail half of the class. They don't know how to write. And I'm not teaching writing.
Right. Right.
I'm teaching you the skill of how to put together a proposal. And they said, no, that this is the way it is. They're at USC. They got in. They gotta come up.
Yeah.
So it was really hard to see, and a lot of them were Latinos and Black students. And so we know what the school system does to many of our young students,
Yeah.
So it was me having to take more time to then meet with them after school, say, go get some mentor, and around this tutoring, but you got to improve your writing. And so I would say make sure that you feel comfortable with your writing. Do whatever you need to do. That challenge, this, you may not need a second job, but you definitely need to have some extracurricular activities that are going to help you build your curriculum, your own CV.
Right. Or enhance your skill sets to the position that you want, right? I
Any
think
position you want, exactly.
right.
And so you look at what's basic. The other part, I think, it's speaking.
Hmm. Yes.
You being a good speaker doesn't mean that you actually have to be in public, being a public speaker. You get to
Right.
that, like that's what I do a lot of right now, public speaking, and I love it. That wasn't the case when I was young. I would feel like,
Right.
oh my God. But
I
I love it. I love it. I can, I was a speaker at the Women's March one year, and there were like 500 women out there, people, and I just felt like, wow, this is so powerful that I can speak to all of these people. So but that wasn't the case. So I would say, join a group. There are lots of clubs um, that actually are good for public speaking, and challenge yourself, feel comfortable in an audience, because that not only helps you to be able to be a speaker, but it also allows you to speak your own mind.
Right.
It allows you to show up to a place with your back straight, your head up high, and you know how to articulate what you need and what you want to say. It's like being in a debate team, right? It's the best thing anybody could do is be in a debate team, because
Right.
it really teaches you to program yourself in a way that you get to say what you need to say at the time you got to say that.
Is this something you developed within yourself? Like, how were you as a young professional, right? Because now you're at the end of your career, so you know the
Yeah.
advice to give people. How did you develop yourself knowing that you started off as this timid, shy speaker to who you are now? What did you personally do to accomplish the woman, that you are
Yeah.
now?
Yeah. Well, I think, again, I always put myself out there.
Right.
Sometimes, I fumbled. Sometimes I fell on my face, but I just get up and go again. And so, but really having the space, I took public speaking. So
Mm,
that's why I highly recommend it. It was in that class. I took a class. And then it was in that class that I was able to understand what really inhibited me from being able to go from here to here,
I see.
right? And so once you understand the blockers, that to me was like eye opener. It was like, you have blockers, Veronica. What are my
Right.
blockers? And so once I released those blockers, I was able to speak, and they would bring people in, I mean, it was a class, so they did it in different ways, but I had to do it. It wasn't something that I evolved just overnight,
Right.
because I was a shy speaker, you know, and,
Practice makes
and then
perfect.
my accent, I mean, sometimes my accent has gotten better over the years,
Right.
but when I was younger, it was there. And so it was always like, oh, look how cute she is. I couldn't get out of people just like moving away from my accent and listening to what I was actually saying.
Right. And I just want to add for the people listening, invest in yourself. A community college public speaking class, max 60, I don't know what the prices are now, sorry, but whatever that, even if it's $100, that is an investment to your
Yes.
future. So you have to look past the financial investment, or think about it. If you want to buy yourself a new pair of shoes, hold, it's the same thing, because who you are and how you present yourself
Yeah.
will get you so many opportunities. And there are a variety of ways to practice speaking. Personally, that was a goal I had 3 years ago, right? I wanted to improve my presentation skills. Something that I did was I started volunteering at work to present more. They're virtual presentations, and it's not something I'm paying for, but it's something that I'm going to force myself to do, right?
Yeah.
Even this channel, I want to work even further on my presentation skills, on my public speaking skills. You can find and make your own resources that will really foster and develop your professional development. You just have to be creative, think outside
Yeah.
the box, but also be willing to make that investment within yourself. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. No, we truly appreciate it. I think another thing that ties into this is charisma. How are
Mm.
you using your presentation, your speaking, to be charismatic, and really letting your personality chime into the people that you're interacting with? And I think you touched on something earlier within networking.
Mhm.
It's that first impression of, oh, I had a really good experience with Veronica. She's such a charming, great person. What is the takeaway you want people to take away when they leave that conversation with you, or when they tell, oh, yeah, I spoke to Diana. She was really funny. Or I spoke to Veronica, very smart, insightful woman. You
Mhm.
have to be cognizant of what the takeaway is when
Yes.
people leave you. And again, professionally, if you are able to develop that earlier on, you're going to do great. Like, you're going to be in Veronica's position, and people are going to want to work with you. So I absolutely love that. And I do have another question for you. When you are strategizing, because like you, I have a passion for community outreach. Like, I don't see myself expanding to the private sector. I want to stay, really make community impact. But at the same time, their cost of living, you do have to make money, right? So how are you strategizing your career to align with a sustainable, income? Like, how would you say, or how would you help someone or guide someone within that, right? Because I think obviously there's not a lot of money on our end. There is more money when you get to the top, but that takes time to reach, right? So
Yeah.
do you have any recommendations for people?
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. It's a package
Right.
that I'm going to tell you. It's not a one way thing, right? It's a
Okay.
package. So first, one of the things that I would say, absolutely take a look at your benefits package. First of all, right? Look at what the company that you're working with, whether it's a nonprofit or for profit, what are your benefits? And do you have a 403B or a 401k? If you do, and they're contributing to that, make sure that, like you said, invest in yourself, contribute the
Right.
same amount so that way you're just doubling the money. That's free money. We, in my organization, we have a 403B. We contribute 4% to every employee. And not even half of the of my employees were taking advantage of it. So I thought, no, 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 this is not acceptable. So we just made it automatic. After you've been working with us for 3 months, you are automatically enrolled in the program. So we're giving you the 4%. Whether you match it or not, that's up to you.
Right.
But at least you're getting the free money.
Right.
So using your 403 or your 401k, it's really important at this stage. Don't waste a minute. When you get to a certain point of your career and you're able to utilize certain skill sets, like Diana, you are really the the case study here because it's exactly what you're doing. It's find those passions and those skill sets that can allow you to earn more and more income in other areas,
Right.
right? So I did that. I mean, I think, I was really good at organizing. And so I always ended up in leadership positions in organizing. I was always the chair. I was always the president. I was always, I'm a good leader. I think I'm good at organizing and getting people. And what I'm always told is the reason I want to follow you is because you're so authentic. I'm just me, you
Right.
know? And so when I meet with young people, I say, first thing, don't give me talking points. Just don't give me talking points, please. You don't need to do a presentation for
Right.
me. I need to know who you are here. Like open up and just tell me, what are you? And so if you show up in life professionally in that
Right.
way, that's how I show up. Um, People see that, and I'm telling you, you see the breaking down the barrier sometimes when people approach me, and I'm just like, so hey, and there's none of these, oh, the CEO or
Right.
or all of my other stuff, and none of that matters because I want to approach you as a person. So I
Right.
would say, if that is hard for you, really look in the mirror. Use a mirror and really try to talk to yourself in a tone that's moderate. It's important that we speak at a moderate tone and bring your passion forward, but keep it calm. Whenever I feel like I'm like I breathe and I bring it down. And so professionally, I'm able to maintain this, but I want to be me,
Right.
and that has taken me really far, really far. I have been picked for positions or for opportunities that, people, because I stick out of the crowd.
Right.
Stick out of the crowd, be you, right?
Of
And
course.
be that go getter, but always remember you got people that you're stepping on.
Of course.
And you got to remember, are you stepping on them or are you stepping on their shoulders,
Right. I
right?
think there's something to learn about you right now in when you do get into a position of leadership.
Hmm.
Don't get egotistical. Don't get what is it, the power trip. You need to, one, treat others the way you want to be treated. That's one of my biggest philosophies, one of my favorite quotes. But also, when you get into a position, I got into the supervisor position and I am helping people in the same capacity that my supervisor helped me, which was, hey, you want to advance professionally, you want opportunities, let me see what I can do. That's what I'm passing down because that
Yes.
is how you help our people, but not just our people, anyone that really wants the help. But if I
Yeah.
can help another fellow Latino, that's a major win for me, right? Extra brownie points. But in essence, it's you don't have
Literally.
to, yeah, you don't break break the barrier of, you do make it to the CEO. Don't have that entitlement
Yeah.
with your persona, with who you are as a professional. Give back, continue to give back, especially
Continue to
within
be
our
back.
field. And for you, like, I did want to ask you, you, again, you're currently the CEO of a great organization. How did you prepare to jump levels? Maybe this is more of a question within you're at the mid level of your career. How do you now prepare? Okay, I'm a manager. I'm going to go for this director position. What was that prep work for that stage?
So what I did was a little bit different. I made a choice. It was at a moment where I had a manager position, and but like I said, I had found something that I could bring some extra dollars being a grant writer. So I thought, I need to finish school quick, right? So my undergrad. So instead of 4 years, I did it in 2 years.
Wow.
And I graduated with a 3.9. And so it was really hard
Right.
studying and getting it done. And so I got my undergrad in psychology at Cal State LA. And I was taking a ton of units, right? Because I needed to finish. So my life was studying, working, being an activist. I had no life other than that. So when you talk about sacrificing, I absolutely sacrificed because I thought if I can get this done quick and do well, then I get to think about what do I want to do next, right?
Right.
And not be afraid of what comes next. And so when I did that, um, I stopped working for the company that I was in, and I started doing my own consulting, grant writing.
Mm.
And so I got clients right away because I had been working in the same sector. So then it was
Right.
like, hey, now I'm going to be writing grants. So I started getting all of these jobs that I could do at night. I mean, it was my life was it was crazy for 2 years,
Well,
but you understand.
yes, I definitely understand. And I think as someone who is in the activism or just public sector, right? The sector of giving back or within that field, there are multiple streams of income opportunities. I think that is, I know you've heard it's a buzzword. Oh, do you have multiple streams of income? What's your side hustle? What's your side business? I think you just touched on something that most people wouldn't even be aware of, that if you are a professional, there are ways to get involved within your community and to make money. And I know we did say, oh, it's not all about the money, but sometimes you need money to live. You do need
You need
money to
money
live,
to live.
right?
Yeah.
And it is okay to align your side hustles with community outreach, with things that are truly going to impact the community. Could you speak on other avenues of income that you kind of came up with that might help someone that's also a fellow activist
Well,
or
yeah. Well, this is in that same story. I think that's the part is that once I left the job and I was doing grant writing and I continued to do my activism, I was asked to be on the board of an organization in New York. So, they would pay me to go there to the meeting and come back. And so I got to meet other people. And that's for my next job. And that was my big jump because at this point I was a grant writer. So I was a good writer. And I was able to, articulate what I wanted to do. I was political. I met people that were actually more influential that I didn't even know. The next thing you know, about a year later, I got a job offer in New York to be the deputy director of a law firm. I had
wow.
never done that. I was a manager. I went right into a COO position. And so I thought, oh, yeah, I can do it. Let me take it.
Yes.
And I moved.
And you weren't scared and
No, I
not
was
that
scared. I
well,
was
how did
scared.
you navigate imposter syndrome here? Because I would imagine it's like,
Yeah.
oh, I didn't go to law school. Like, how did you navigate that?
Well, I was very honest. Again, I was just
Okay.
me. So
Yeah.
when at the time, the CEO there, who is an attorney, invited me for a conversation about the position because they recruited me because this other woman had referred me. And so she said, she's speaking so highly of you. You guys are working together on something and blah, blah, blah. And I had started an organization also in New York. I started here, but over there as well. So I had this activist background. That's it.
Yeah.
And so I just said to her, I'm not a lawyer. Same thing. I'm not a
Yeah.
lawyer, so I'm not sure that I can help you. I mean, I know this stuff that you
Right.
want, but I just haven't done that. And she said, you don't have to supervise them as a lawyer. I do that. I need someone who's operations who can really help me take this organization to the next level. And I said, oh, okay, I can do that. And then it was like, okay, when can you start? And that's how I went from I think I was making 30 something at the time, and I moved
Right.
right into a 60,000.
Right.
And at the time it was like, oh, 60,000. That was
Amazing.
a whole
It
year.
was a lot. It was a lot of
So
money.
it was the opportunity. And so
Right.
again, is the environment in which you play.
So I wanted to ask you because I think there's a lot of similarities between us because I tell people my personality and how I am with people gets me a lot of open doors, a lot of open windows, whatever I need. There's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah.
But there's a balance and a talent within being yourself and still being aware of your professional impact. So could
Mhm.
you give some pointers or tips on how to be yourself but still have a very pristine reputation without compromising your reputation?
Yes. This is a very apropos question for me, actually, because
Mhm.
I work in an environment where it's very political.
Right.
And so sometimes I have to be super careful because I mean, I'm city council, the mayor, so I have to be careful, and I don't agree. So a lot of times, I don't agree with some of the stuff that's happening, and so in today, I know how to balance that.
Yeah.
Um, and the best way for me to do it is when I'm not sure, I check with my colleagues, that I trust,
Right.
that I see them as having that, very equitable way of approaching things. And so when I'm feeling, a little bit about, and I wouldn't say discombobulated, but just unsure whether I should just go forward and, say what I mean, or hold back and find
Right.
another way. When I'm not sure, I always ask people that I trust. And I always ask two people.
Okay. What's the logic
I'm
behind
very
two
pragmatic
people?
about it because it's a it's a sensitive game. And so
Right.
when you think about, you got to understand, most importantly is if I just step out as me, and this is not the moment for me to step out as me,
Right.
who am I going to impact? And when you take on a higher position, you will always impact your employees and you will always impact your company. So I always have to think about those two before I can think of myself.
Right.
And that's always in the forefront. And so that's why the people that I connect with, the at least two people, depending on where they are. I mean, I have a good network at this point, and I will just call them. Hey, you got a minute? I need to ask you a question. I just need 10 minutes of your time, and that people do that with me. And so it becomes a very good network of how we can tell each other, just wait,
And I'd like to add, here is the important thing is being a young professional or a professional at any level. And again, you keep touching back on this, your network, your
Oh
connections.
yeah.
What is the impact with the people that surround you? Never be reactive. Don't send that email with all the exclamation points.
No.
Listen, you need to, when in doubt, take a step back, because there have been so many times where I've drafted an email and I delete everything just because I needed to get it out. But
Yeah.
don't send. You don't hit send, because you never know if that person's going to be your boss, or you're going to be a CEO one day and that person's going to remember you from the beginning of your
Oh
career,
yeah.
because you're going to find out that the industry is very small. You
Very,
are
very
so
tiny.
interconnected within the nonprofit public sector. At one point, you're going to connect with someone from your
Oh yeah.
past. So, funny enough, I recently interviewed for a position, and one of the questions was, how are you, or how well do you maintain relationships, and, or how do you maintain, successful relationships? And luckily I had a very eloquent answer for that, because I knew, and I advise everyone, canvas for a political campaign 1 year, so that you are aware of how politically in tune you have to be, because it's cutthroat. I think you can
Oh yeah.
attest to that. It is so cutthroat. I think being a poli sci major really helped me develop these social skills within the professional environment, because even if you work at a nonprofit, you have to be political, public
Oh
sector,
yes.
private sector, at every single level. So if you have time, do it so that you learn if you feel like you don't have those skills. Because let me tell you, the more you understand your office politics, the easier it'll be for you to navigate and understand what you need to do for yourself and how to socialize with everyone around you, because you're gonna meet people that you don't like. I think one of the first things someone told me was, this job is more navigating people than what it is doing your job. And there
Mm.
is so much truth to that, because in every aspect, if you're working, the bigger impact of the organization is what your department or where your position is contributing to the end goal. You're going to interact with everyone. But all in all, again, networking, talking to people, making a positive impact.
Yep.
you need to learn how to do that. And if you're not, guess what? Start fixing start fixing your relationships right
Yes.
now. Go buy someone some coffee and say, I'm sorry. I was on my period. I don't know what to tell
I
you.
did that once.
Yeah. You know what? As a woman, it's a great get out of jail free card. Like, oh,
Yes.
I'm so sorry. So I love
It was
that.
that day of the month.
It really is. I want to segue into this question because you've spoken about mentorship and you are a mentor. What is one of the best career advice you have received, or at least at the beginning of your career, that really resonated with you and helped you along your journey? Do you have something you can
Mm,
share from the start of your career and maybe at the end of your career, an advice you give now?
yeah. So I think the best advice I ever got, which changed my life, was, you know, do what you love.
Hmm.
What really, like, when you talk about, like, I would talk about, I was doing the financial stuff that I told you, and then
Right.
and then somebody would ask me about my political side, and I would say, oh, and then, and
Yes.
then, and then, and then it would go back to the other. Oh yeah, we do that. Oh yeah, yeah, investment, yeah. And then, so it was very obvious once
Right.
you move all of that and you think, what drives you, right? And that really was my moment to shift in my career. And I have to tell you, when I did that, I went for the obvious was going into social work.
Okay.
That was the obvious for
Yes.
me. And so I went and I got into USC, actually at the time. So I started my master's degree the first year of social work. I almost died. I hated it.
It's so hard.
Oh no,
It's
I
a hard
hated it.
deal.
I hated it. It was like I was sitting in class going, ah. And then once I had to go and do therapy, individual therapy, I was like, oh no, I can't do this. And I realized, I couldn't put it into words at the time, and I realized, this is not going to work for me. Like
Right.
I'm sitting here listening to this person tell me their problems, and I'm thinking about lunch tomorrow, or I would just think, if I could just tell you what to do, I know I could fix your life. Like I'm a fixer. The other thing, know yourself. I'm a fixer. You tell me a problem, I'll fix it for you.
10
So I
solutions
know
right
I was
now.
a fixer.
Yes.
So I decided, okay, this is not going to work. Now, at that moment, my parents understood what I was studying.
Okay.
Then I went and I said, okay, guys, I was taking myself to school, so it wasn't their choice. But
Right.
I told them, I'm going to leave that. And I don't know what I need to study because I want to do my graduate stuff, but I can't do that. And so I continued working for about a couple of months, and I kept pursuing and reading and what am I going to do? And then a friend of mine said, who had been an activist with me, and she was actually leaving to get her PhD in Boston. And she said, one of the things about you that I know is that you're a macro person.
Mm.
You are not a micro person, you know? And I thought, oh my God, that's right. I'm really not a detail. That's why it's good. I'm an idea person, right?
Yeah.
And I can see the forest, but it's really hard for me to work on a tree, and no, I have to know that's my limitation. I will go crazy if I just have to work in a tree. So I have to be able to see the forest. And so she said, you are a macro person. So why don't you think about a career that really allows you to think about macro perspectives in a systemic way, right? So I thought,
Wow.
yeah, what is that? Organizational development. It was a new area at the time, and they were teaching in Santa Barbara. So I said, oh, okay. So I went and I checked it out, and I thought, yes, I'm going to do a PhD in human and organizational development. And that's what I started. I started to do that.
And
And I love it.
that is
To
fantastic.
this day, I love it.
And being inquisitive, because I can relate. I will ask a question. One of my favorite philosophies that I tell people, you're already at a no. The worst thing they can say is no. So make the ask.
Mhm.
And in circling back to, you are who you hang out with and the resources, and even having a network of activists like you had, the level of knowledge that the people that you surround yourself with were able to expose you to something that you weren't aware of. So
Yeah.
I think if I'm going to ask a question out of this, it's how do you select the people who you're surrounding yourself with? Do you have a personal, you know, I guess, exit
Yes.
list or checklist of people where, like, all right, I'm cycling you out, I'm cycling you in?
Yes.
What do you do?
Oh, yes. I definitely do that. It gets easier as you get older, I have to say.
Okay.
Definitely gets easier. Um, but when I was younger, I was surrounded by a lot of people
Hmm.
because of the work that I was doing. And in my personal and in my professional, I was surrounded by a lot of people from different perspectives and cultures. Um, and I think I learned to operate within that. But I learned to operate within that.
Right.
It wasn't natural to me to be around everyone from different perspectives. You
Right.
don't like everybody, like you said. Not everybody brings value. And so it wasn't until probably I got into my 40s when I thought, why am I hanging out with all of these other people? Like, what is the value to me? Right?
Right.
I want to have people around me who think positively, people who read. I want to talk about stuff. Tell me what you read yesterday. Like,
Right.
I had dinner with this woman and she tells me, you know what, there's a great book. Oh, tell me what it is. I love that. So I want to be around people who read. I need people who are social activists in some way.
Hmm.
Otherwise, it's really hard for me to
Right.
relate because
Right.
this is who I am. And so for me, it's important. So you have to define what's important for you. Again, it goes back to your values, right? My
Yes.
values are those. And lastly, I really love people who help others.
Right.
Because when I take on someone or I'm helping, and I do this a lot in different ways, I always say, I'm doing this, but I want you to remember to pass it on.
Right.
That's my only request. That you, whenever you can in your life, at some point, remember to pass it on. And and that's all I want, right? And
Right.
so I want to surround myself with those people. And I have to tell you, I have these lifelong friends, of God, 40 years that we've been since I've been in this country and,
Of
and
course.
in California. And so and and that's what it always stays at the top. It remains the same things, people who are like doers. I'm a doer. And
Of
so
course. Of
be a
course.
doer,
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes. I absolutely love that. I kind of want to segue a little bit to a fun question, right?
Okay.
So, as a professional, you've had
They were
such a
all fun
vast,
questions. Yes, it
yeah,
is.
such a vast career, and as you know, you experienced so much turbulence in your home life, work-life balance, right? I think that's a buzzword as well. Can you share how, if you've ever gone through an emotional time at home and how you navigated the workplace? Like, how were you able to keep your composure? Was it a breakup? Was it a fight with your sister or whatever you'd like to share? But
Mhm.
I think that's really great for awareness with people who it's real. We're real people and
Yeah.
sometimes we cry in the office.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I have to say, I'm a crybaby.
Me too.
Oh, you are? Okay. So my team members right now, can tell me, like, when we go into a meeting, it's like, oh my God, Veronica's here, we're gonna cry. I'm like, you guys, stop it. So I'm a crybaby.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think the hardest time in my life. I mean, it's been all kinds of stuff, but the hardest I think is when my father passed away.
Yeah.
And I was in my PhD program, and I was in New York at that
Wow.
point. That's when I was doing the job up there, and so I was traveling, going to Santa Barbara, and I finished all my coursework, and I had to do my dissertation, and my father died, and he was in Chile. So that was such a, I almost felt like I had a little cord, that connected me to this country, that
Right.
somehow cord that actually helped me. So I was okay as long as the cord was there. And when my father passed away, I felt like I had nothing.
Mm,
to ground me
yeah.
in that way, and I had no other family here because they were all in Chile or somewhere else in other parts of the world at that point. And so, and no social media, we had lost contact of phones,
Right.
there was really no family. So it was just this one link of the strongest person that has supported me since I was a kid. And so I kind of lost it. And I felt sad and I felt abandoned and I felt like my intellectual ability wasn't there anymore. And the worst thing for me was that my empathy was not there. Like
Mm,
I just didn't care.
right.
And I thought, if I show up the way I feel right now to my work, I'm going to devastate other people because I have so much sadness that I'm going to devastate others.
Right.
So I just thought, maybe what I need to do is just stop everything. I just need to stop and just trust that I'm going to be okay and just take care of myself. And that was an incredibly hard decision.
I'm sure.
That was an incredibly hard decision because at the time I was the executive director of the National League for Nursing in New York. By that, I had moved to another position that recruited me. And when I left, I had to leave that because I just couldn't do it. And so being able to allow myself, and I have to say, people really should look at that because it was important, and it allowed me to it opened me up. It allowed me to have the space for my next phase. And I told my partner, who's still my wife, of we're going to be 27 years in September.
Congrats.
Thanks. And so at the time, I said to her, I can't do nonprofit right now.
Right.
I can't work with people right now. Um, I think I need to bring my creative side forth. She was like, creative side? I'm like, yeah, I think I want to be an artist for a minute. Like, what?
I love it.
so, so I decided that I wanted to create jewelry. And I thought, yeah, but I need to be good at what that's one thing. If you're going to choose something, be good at it.
Don't be
Don't
mediocre.
be mediocre. No, 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 no. I don't care what you do.
Right.
Bus driver, picking up trash,
You're the
being a
best.
CEO, whatever you're going to do, please be really good at what you do. It's such an amazing way for our self-esteem to
For sure.
improve. If you yourself feel like, man, I'm putting all my best forward. And so I thought, if I'm going to do this, I need to be good at it and I need to know how it's done. So I went to India. I did. I went to India to learn about stones and jewelry and silversmithing. And so I learned all that. And then I came back and I started a business. And it became very successful. And so then our clients were like Neiman Marcus, Barney's. We got into New York Barney's.
Wow.
We got into magazines. So it was a really great way for me to just find another way to let this sadness and I could, my father was an entrepreneur. So it was like, it was honoring
Paying
him,
homage. Yeah.
it was just going really inside and discovering that this is what I need right now.
I
And I
love
still made money.
that. Of
You know,
course. Of
I still
course.
made money. I ended up selling the company and doing well. And so, but I also recognized when I got to a certain point where I was healed, and this was not, I was only going to do it for a year. It went to 5 years.
Wow.
At the fifth year is when I was like, this doesn't feed me.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel good now. I'm normal now. I've dealt with all this stuff. I miss my father. I miss that family. I miss all of that. But it's not making
Feeding
me
the soul.
feel like, I can't move.
Mm-hmm.
So then I went back to the nonprofit sector again as a consultant.
I love that. I also wanted to ask you, as professionals, as women, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Selecting the right partner is so important because if you didn't have your
Yeah.
wife who supported that decision,
Yeah.
there would be no India, there'd be no cosmetic or, jewelry line. Could you, you know, share some knowledge or some insight to people who are in a dysfunctional relationship, their partner's not supportive of their career? What would you recommend to that person?
Leave them. No, I'm just kidding.
You gotta
All right, seriously now.
go. Yeah.
That's thank you for that question, because I think, this is similar to our friends.
Yes.
When we think about our best friends, whether they're male or female, there are certain elements that we expect to have from our best friend.
Right.
And when they're not there, we like let them know. But for some reason, we don't do that with our partner.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We just put up with this for some reason. It's like that need to, oh, I love him or I love her. And so, but it's not good for me, or they don't support me. I think there's two things I've learned. One is that there's neurodiversity. So I think understanding neurodiversity is really important. There are a lot of people who are different, who have different, and it's all mental health, but it's,
Right.
this is happening in our society, right? And so, knowing when someone is a little bit different, understanding, is that a difference because of who they are, or is it because they are just wanting to own me as an asset?
Yes.
Right. And so really being clear, and I think that's the hard part, because how do you do that? And so, I go back to reading always. I mean, there's a lot of online information now. Like, if your partner is acting in a certain way, look it up.
Yes.
See if there's some neurodiversity, because then that allows you to address that issue and your relationship could be great. But if you have a relationship where your partner is trying to control your time, is trying to control your aspirations,
Mm-hmm.
trying to control you, right? Being you. I mean, Diana, I look at you and I think, man, I bet you some guys is going to want to control you, because you are a go-getter. You're very strategic. You're right. And you think about, okay, if I'm going to do this, that's
Right.
strategy,
Right.
right? Now somebody comes in the way and it's like, that could be really difficult for especially men. That could
Yes.
be really difficult, especially Latinos. You think
Mm-hmm.
of it, it could be really difficult. And so you have to be able to find your support system. And this is where we have our friends, right? This is where we have
Mm-hmm.
friends. And let me tell you just one little thing. I was talking to
Yeah.
someone yesterday, because we're working on a project, and she recommended a book to me. And see, here we go again. Because I was saying to her, one of the things we're doing is we're restructuring, and I'm actually going to now begin to build this institute for Black and Brown girls and women
Right.
and leadership. And so we're going to build that institute within the organization. And so I'm really working
Amazing.
toward creating that space. And so she's the person who's branding us in there. So she's going to develop the entire pitch.
Right.
And she said, that's great, because, there's a book that I would recommend, and it's about how do girls end up really being in this space where they just kind of, don't see themselves as leaders, or they're just so dependent on another person.
Mm-hmm.
And, and she was saying, and what they were talking about was, when boys are brought up, they're encouraged to play sports and like go play in teams, right? It's all about teams, the competition with the team, then they have other guys that they're with, or other kids, boys.
Right.
Girls are encouraged to have single relationships.
Mm.
You don't hear a lot of guys saying my best friend, or my best friend, like one best friend. Women do it a lot. My
Yeah.
girlfriend, my best girlfriend, my best friend. So we're very
Singular.
attuned with that.
Mhm.
But that's how we're brought up. Like, that is the way you should be. It's a one person deal there. That's really unique to value. But whereas it's a network, it's an
Right.
actual, it's a group of people around you. So really finding other women. See, it goes back to the environment you're in.
Mm-hmm.
Finding other women like you, that are strong,
Right.
And I can say to you, no, you are beautiful, you're smart, you have an amazing way of thinking about yourself. Oh my God, the last thing you need is somebody to think of you in the opposite direction.
So I'd like to
You're
share
you're
two
loving.
things with you because I did experience that. One, learn the red flags of your partner. If your partner is jealous, because that happens with your boyfriend or your girlfriend,
Oh
where
yeah.
they are like, oh, I remember I was interviewing. I didn't even have a job offer. I was interviewing for an NBC position. And my partner at the time, because I broke up with them, they did not even want to. I was like, hey, can you look at my resume? No. When I started talking to him about the interview and I was like, yeah, I'm prepping. He's like, oh, why do you even want to get this job? You don't want it. And it was this huge fight. And then he later confessed, it's because I'm scared you're gonna meet someone else. Or you're gonna meet someone that's so great or so big. And then my second point to this is I read the Trevor Noah book, which Born a Crime, I highly
Ah,
recommend
I
everyone read
love
it
Trevor
because
Noah.
there's a little section about his mom, and when I tell you, bells were ringing for me because the mother, who was very strong, just like that, strong, independent, creative, a feminist, outspoken, got with this man who was beating her. And Trevor asked her, like, why is he beating you? Why is he beating you? And he's like, well, some men love the free bird and their objective is to cage it.
Yeah.
And when I, Veronica, I
Wow.
was like, this man's trying to cage me. I'm that free
Yes.
bird. And he has done everything in his power to really dwindle me down. Got out of that situation. I would never be in that situation again in my life. But it was a learning experience as a woman, as a partner, where I told myself, I'm like, oh, it is so easy to get sucked into feeling like you're in love, feeling like you have to be with this person. But if this person doesn't serve you professionally, personally, because your partner is supposed to elevate you or you're supposed to elevate
Yes.
together.
Exactly.
And if they don't have the capacity to even like want to look at your resume for 5 minutes, that's not the person for you. Guess what? That is a red flag, and that
Yeah.
person is not going to help you in the long run. So I
Yeah.
appreciate you sharing that. And everyone read that Trevor Noah book. I absolutely love it. But overall, like as a woman, like I was like, oh my gosh, they're intimidated by very strong women, and
Yes.
that's men and women alike. It could be your girlfriend, it could be your boyfriend, it could be your prima. Like people will try to tear you down. You don't need to talk to those people ever again in your life,
No. Yeah.
and don't. So I absolutely, if there's a big takeaway there with your relationships, make
Yeah.
sure that you're with someone that's supporting you or is on the journey with you. So I wanted to ask you one quick
Mhm.
thing about your publications because again, I see that you have a vast amount of publications. Would you recommend a professional to work on getting published? Is that something that should be a check
Yes.
on the checklist? Okay.
On the checklist. Yeah. Um, I mean, now there's a lot of different ways to do it. Now before it used to be that it was, all this academic stuff. Now there's all kinds of ways. And so one of the things I tell my young team members who are on the policy side is when I am interested in something, I would write a paper, a white paper.
Wow.
And so write white papers, or you write a blog. I mean, now you can, there's a ton of blogs,
Yeah.
write a blog. Um, write from a from your personal experience, but always be about facts, evidence. So when we write, and so that begins to really move you. And I've been recognized in different places because of the stuff that's out there. Actually, one of the things, for example, let me give you an example. I was thinking about, the last recession in
Mm-hmm.
2008 almost killed our people, right?
Right.
It was so bad for particular communities of color. So I thought, well, at some point, this is where the finance stuff comes in, right?
Yeah.
See, keeping track of the
It all
market,
clicks. It all
it
connects.
all comes back, girl. And so I'm like looking at the market and I'm thinking, okay, you know, we don't have the same kind of pillars that fell the last time, but there will
Right.
be another recession.
Right.
And when that happens, we're going to be in a worse position than we were in 2008 because things have not improved that much. So, and all the economic indicators said, we're going to be worse. So I called a meeting together and of other CEOs who worked in this space. And I had about 20 people in the room, and I said, let's talk about this. I wrote the paper around the recession and a white paper, and I sent it to them, and I said, this is what I want to talk about, right? And so,
Right.
oh, okay. So, we laid it all out. I'm happy to share with you. So
Yes.
once we met, there were only a couple of people in the room who actually thought, why are we talking? Everybody else was like, why are we talking about the recession? We're like in a good place, right? Um, and only two people in the room who are top CEOs of companies. I'm not going to say their name, but top CEOs. And then
Mhm.
one of them came to me and said, I want to work with you on this. I also agree. I think it is coming, and we have to prepare. And the next thing you know is the Federal Reserve sees
Mm.
my paper somehow, and the Federal Reserve of San Francisco reaches out to me and says, we only pick two partners in each state. We would like to be your partner in one of in California. I'm like, in Southern California. I'm like, okay. So from that, they now became part of our network of companies that we were working with. So we started working with the Federal Reserve on
Amazing.
economic opportunities. And so that really grew into another area of the work. So I always tell my team, if you have an idea, don't wait for somebody to think it. Look at the evidence. Look at the evidence. Is this happening?
Right.
Facts, right? I mean, facts are like gold nowadays.
Yeah.
Getting better, but man, um, look at the facts, look at the evidence, and then what do you care about?
Right.
If you're concerned, write it. See, it
Right.
goes back to writing. Write it. Put your thoughts into a paper that allows you to share with the world. Like I'm going to write an article now. I want to write an article about how we're being. Anyways, let me not get into that. But there's stuff that you care about. Put it
Right.
somewhere.
So I want to ask you because again, I think you mentioned, be knowledgeable, be well read, and
Yes.
just do.
Mhm.
What would you tell people who currently have a barrier in, I don't have time, I'm tired after work, like how
Yeah.
do you force yourself or commit yourself, not force, commit yourself to doing these side projects because a lot of people don't want to put in time because they're not
Yeah.
getting paid for it. What
That's
would
right.
you recommend?
So find the easiest way for you to do this. I mean, nowadays, again, there's a lot of different opportunities. You can follow people on social media. There's not a whole lot out there anymore that's worth
Hmm.
anything. But, the only thing I really use nowadays is Instagram around my
Right.
social media. That's about it.
Hmm.
And then I use LinkedIn for my professional stuff.
Yeah.
So I would say use LinkedIn to at least keep updated with your sector and know who's doing what and what's of interest to your sector. So I would say LinkedIn is a really good place to be because you can build networks there and really understand what's happening in
Right.
a quick way, social
Right.
media way. The other part is if you don't have time to read and you may or may not have a commute anymore, but any time that you're in the car, get an audiobook.
Mm.
Instead of listening to music in that moment, pick an hour, pick a time where of a subject that you want to improve yourself upon, or you want to grow, you want to learn more, but you have to be knowledgeable. I can tell you for a fact that a person will never advance to a higher position as a CEO unless you are very knowledgeable,
Hmm.
because you have to be able to serve your staff. You have to be able to serve, and someone comes to you and says, I don't know. Okay, according to this, and I want to recommend this article for you, or read this, or I need you to take a class. They're doing it here, or this is what I know,
Right.
right? And so there's ways in which you have to be prepared with knowledge. And whenever you're trying to move to the next level of your position, people recognize when you're an eligible person, when you are a go-getter. Like I love people like you. So, and I recognize them, and I know everybody else around me does the same thing, because those are nuggets, and so now they're nuggets. They're not the sand,
Right.
right? And so if you want to be a nugget and not part of the sand, you have to be knowledgeable about your sector. You have to be knowledgeable about what you are speaking about. The worst thing to do, especially when you're talking about impressions, and I would say,
Right.
please don't ever do this for your audience.
Let's see.
This is the worst. Somebody who steps, you're having a conversation, somebody steps up and starts talking about their opinion.
Mm,
My opinion is, vaccines are not good because, they're spaceship stuff, like that's ignorance,
right.
right? And ignorance is a really scary tool because it keeps people down,
Right.
especially us.
Right.
So ignorance is scary. It can cause damage, it can cause harm. So being knowledgeable is the only way that you can step into something and know that somebody's lying. Know that you know the information, you know what needs to happen. Don't
Right.
let others inform you about their opinion when it's not based on facts or evidence.
Mm-hmm.
That immediately, I mean, I tell you, especially
It's
men
a
do
trigger. It's a
I say
trigger.
men do a lot more than women, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Women are not so bad at this. Women actually are much better at this. Women tend to not speak up unless you are one of those people. Women tend not to speak up.
Right.
And so make sure that you always allow the room for every woman in the room to speak.
Of course.
And when you have men in your life, talk to the men in your life about being different, about making sure that as much as space as they take, they need to allow for a woman to take that. And not allow, make sure that there's space for everyone in the room.
I love that. I have two final questions for you.
Okay.
You've graced us with a lot of time, so thank you. My first one is, you're very active in the community and you still volunteer. I absolutely love that. Can you speak on why you volunteer as a professional? Why you choose to volunteer?
It keeps me real. It keeps me, informed. It keeps me connected. It makes me happy. It's really that. And it depends on the volunteer. Like my volunteer is a little bit different than it used to be when I was younger. My volunteer now is I volunteer on boards,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because these are boards that, as a board member of right now, and I only take one nowadays. I only take one board at a time, and so right now I'm on the board of the Liberty Hill Foundation, and so on that board, I'm able to align what I care about with what they do. And so that keeps me happy. I'm
Yeah.
volunteering, I'm doing something outside of my regular work. And I need that. Not everybody needs it, absolutely. Um, but it continues to grow you. And for me, it's about growth. Like I need it. That's all.
Yeah.
And not everybody does. Some people just
Right.
don't need that much. And that's okay. But whatever you are and wherever you want to be, make sure that you're really good at it.
Yeah. I love that. And that segues into my last and final question. Is there any final remarks, any advice that you would like to give everyone out there listening or watching this, that would really benefit their careers? Any last final words?
Yeah, I would say, there's always that's an interesting way, like, oh, what now? But maybe it's this question around worth, the salary and then what you do. And I think, having the salary is important. Um, Also having this other component with the salary that it's about building you as a person is also important. And so having the two it's sometimes hard to find, but I would say find it because you will find it, So which means don't ever settle. And that is my advice, and professionally
Yes.
and personally.
Yes.
Do
I
not
love that.
settle because you don't need to settle. When the minute you settle, what it does, it closes the doors because the universe, and I'm a true believer in what the universe brings when you open yourself up. And sometimes you just have to trust.
Yes.
I'm dealing with one of my, I mean, she is older than me actually, and she's in the process of selling her law firm, and I'm trying to help her, and I tell her to slow down and think about, where you are and what you need. You don't need to give it away.
Right.
Just don't settle for what sounds good.
Right.
And so I would say that don't ever settle with a man, a woman, or your job.
I love that. And I'll just add a tiny little insert of, you know, there's a misconception a little bit that there is no money in the public sector. There is, you
Oh
just have to keep
yes.
moving up within your career so you can still impact your community, impact, the people around you, and
Mhm.
you can have a livable wage. You just have to be willing to find that trajectory that works for you and that aligns with your values, right?
Correct.
Everyone hits that fork in the road where you say, do I jump to the private sector because I need money, or do I keep helping people? If your passion is to help people,
Yeah.
find a way. You're going to do it. You're going to find
And
it.
and I have to tell you, nowadays it's not the same way that it used to be a few years
Right.
ago. Especially after COVID, actually,
Mhm.
things really shifted. And
Yeah.
so, for example, I was talking to one of the top architectural firms because we do some work with them, and he was complaining about people and this is happening, and we pay them $60,000 for these architects. I'm like, what? Our starting position pays 62,000, and that's community outreach.
Wow.
So we are now, I think, in this industry
Hmm.
finally coming to be at par. If you have an education,
Right.
and as long as make sure that you at least get a bachelor's. I know that there's all these questions about higher education and what you
Mhm.
do, but that initial 4-year degree really allows you an opportunity to learn and really
Right.
take classes that are going to challenge you,
Right.
because it's a different environment. We learn differently. We are exposed to so much more than we may not choose to. And like you said, not everybody's about books and not everybody's about watching TED Talks, which I love.
Right.
Recommend-
Right.
But again,
Guilty
not everybody's
pleasure.
into that. And school a lot makes you be in that space when you're around people who are just going to have to be studious for a while,
Right.
and you're going to engage with your professors, and you're going to meet people who are going to change your life in the future.
Right. 1000%. I absolutely love that. Well, thank you so much, Veronica. It was such a pleasure speaking to you. And we want to thank everyone for listening and join us next time.
Thank you.